Hi, today I want to talk about part 2 of the IELTS. As I mentioned in the overview, part 2 of the IELTS speaking is what we sometimes call the individual long term. So the first thing that will happen is after you finish part 1, the examiner will tell you that you're going to start with a topic. He's going to tell you that you're going to talk about a topic. Remember, you will be talking for 1 to 2 minutes, and you will also have 1 minute to prepare before you speak. At this time, this is when you need to make notes on what you're going to talk about. 1 minute is very fast. So when you do this, you will not have time to write full sentences or to make full answers. So you have to think. You need to have some key words that you can write down. The questions will be based on the question words, which I've discussed before: what, where, when, why, how, and who. So you'll have those question words. It'll be arranged on the card in a way that you'll know. And when you make your notes, you want to make sure that when you do this, you read the instructions carefully. What that means is you're reading the questions carefully. You're making sure that you understand what the questions are asking you. And then, again, no sentences, only key words. Another thing that I like to mention here is think about the tense. In other words, are they asking you to talk about a past tense, a present tense, or a future tense question? This is very important. Usually I tell my students to write, for example, write past. If they want you to talk about the past, that way you're using all past tense words. So for this part, remember that you're reading the questions carefully, and you're also only using key words. For example, if they ask you a what question, you know what means they're looking for information. What kind of information do they want? If they ask you a why question, that means a reason why you're doing something. If they ask you a where question, they're asking you a place. So you have to think about where it was. If they ask you a when question, it's dealing with time. So you need to think, well, gee, when was it? Was it 3 years ago? Was it last week? Was it last month? You need to look at those things. How is also information. For example, if they're not going to do this, but how old are you? It's information about your age. They're going to ask you maybe how do you feel about something, or how you felt about something. Past tense would be how you felt about something. So make sure that you're thinking about what those question words are asking you. The next thing is, after you make your notes, you have to decide where your story begins. Whatever topic they've asked you about, you need to decide, well, how am I going to start this? I like to tell my students to pretend you're telling a story. It makes it much easier, and because you're nervous, you need to think of something that makes you relax. So when you're relaxed, you can tell a better story. Sometimes you may say, well, the first thing I thought of when I saw this card, or the first thing I thought of when I saw this topic, that's a good way to begin. Or, oh, this is a very interesting topic. I'm very excited to talk about it. Again, it's kind of letting you relax and kind of lead in to the topic. So try to decide where your story begins. One thing that you want to do is you want to try to think of something interesting to say that might interest and hold the attention of the listener. Maybe you have something funny to say, or maybe it was something that was very scary for you. Try to think of something that's fun and interesting to talk about, because then the story is a little bit more interesting for the examiner to hear. The next thing is you do you do want to make sure that you think about all of the points. Make sure to mention something about each point. Again, you're going to have those question words like I mentioned before, so try to have something, a key word mentioned about each point. And then you're a little bit more ready. And again, you want to try to cover everything, but you don't have to talk about it in the order that's on the card. As long as you try to cover every point, that's what's important. So it will depend on how your story is. For example, if you're talking about something, for example, when you were a small child, you want to start the story how you remember it as a child, and you want to talk about each thing. You know, if it's about a place where you lived, you might say, well, when I was 5 years old, we lived in Halong Bay. Maybe you talk about that. Remember all the things that you remember. Oh, do you remember the house that you lived in or the apartment that you lived in? Do you remember how it made you feel? Do you remember smells? Were you in the countryside? Were you in the city? Think about all those things when you were a little boy or a girl, for example, in that topic. And then as you speak, try to look down at your notes. Like I said before, you'll have key words on each question. You look down at your notes if you forget, and you just make sure you keep yourself focused. The next thing is, again, I mentioned this before, mention how you feel or felt. Share your emotions. Usually the last question will ask you something about how it made you feel, or how you feel now, or how did you feel then. So think about your emotion, what you felt. And then the last thing, depending on the topic, you will want to make sure that you're using vocabulary related to that. Like, for example, I mentioned the house, so maybe you're going to use words like, well, where did you live? When did you live there? And think about useful vocabulary to talk about your house. How many floors was your house? How big was your house? What was the color of your house? Using useful vocabulary to help you discuss all of those things related to that point that you're talking about. Again, the vocabulary is going to be related to whatever the topic is. Where you live, transportation, music, television, movies, whatever the topic is about, you want to think about vocabulary that's related to that topic, and vocabulary that's usually used when you talk about that topic.